Dorothy. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Sorry, I know I picked the time right when you walked away, but all right. So, hello climbers, welcome. My name is Tiffany. I'm a manager at Rocks, Ropes and the Block Climbing and Fitness. First and foremost, thanks for joining us tonight. We're glad people are interested and that Dorothy has volunteered her time to be with us. So hopefully you've already watched the first video we shared. It was an introduction to Dorothy and to what we're planning on doing with this little series. So again, this video is being recorded. It will be available on both Jim's Instagram accounts, and it will also be available on the Rocks Ropes YouTube channel. Yes, we do in fact have a YouTube channel. There are some awesome old videos on there. I encourage you to check it out. Really quickly to recap our first installment, Dorothy Keene, over here, she is an occupational therapist. She's a certified hand therapist. She's a most excellent smiler, and she's also a local climber. And she has a really thoughtful, amazing approach to preparing and caring for your hands, but also your upper extremities. So I had to learn this pretty quickly. UE stands for upper extremity, meaning your hands, your wrist, your elbow, and your shoulder. So she is a hand specialist, but that actually applies to the entire upper extremity. So we're just excited that she's got a really mindful, holistic approach to what she does and that she wants to help us share that knowledge with the community. I personally introduce climbing to a lot of people, and I say that rock climbing is a lifetime sport. So to have somebody, a medical professional, who is willing to share information with us and foster that aspect of listening, which is part of self-care, for lack of a better phrase, that's really important. And it's more likely that you'll be able to climb and be healthy and be strong for your entire lifetime. So tonight we're going to talk about warming up. There will be a short Q&A afterwards. And as much as I hope we all have a routine to ready our bodies for this sport that we dearly love, let's get a more in-depth understanding. So I'm going to turn it over to Dorothy.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for being here, and thank you for the lovely introduction. It's nice to be able to be mask-free so you can see my smile. Yeah. Everyone else's too. Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this topic. It's something that came up a lot in the surveys that we did, and it's a frequently asked question, and really not something I often talk or teach about a lot. So it was a lot of fun, yeah, putting this together. And it's not, like Tiffany said, it's not just for hand health, but kind of for a whole person. And I'll talk about kind of climbing specific examples, but a lot of these concepts can be really applied to all activities. And I have to remember, my mom is my #1 fan, and according to her, she could not understand me in my intro because I talk too quiet and too fast. So I'm going to do my very best to talk loudly and clearly. And see what feedback she gives me tonight. All right, so just a couple of points before we get into talking about warming up. First, it's interesting, there's a lot of conflicting research about warming up. So kind of what I'll talk about today is more of a general reflection of current evidence. You know, as we continue to learn and kind of build our knowledge in this area and more research is being done, you know, we'll learn more, and then especially as it relates to climbing. Not a ton of research out there that's climbing specific. And I'm hoping, you know, with it being added to the Olympics and becoming a little bit more, you know, kind of more known, I'm hoping more research will come out that's specific to climbing. So I'm excited for that in the future. The second piece, there's not strong evidence, and this is probably going to surprise some people, there's not strong evidence that warming up prevents injury. All right, it's kind of like goes against everything that we've kind of been taught. But it's more of injury prevention is something that kind of gets thrown around a lot, and something that I've used this term many times in my career, and kind of trying to change that. Because when you think about it, we can't prevent things from happening, right? We can do our very best, but life likes to throw us curveballs. And so we can do our best to prevent things, but life can be unpredictable. And so what we do is we can do things to help reduce the risk of injury. So, I mean, example like our safety equipment that we use in climbing, our harnesses, learning how to tie in properly, taking classes, working on technique or strength training. And so I really think there are several aspects in the warm-up process that can really help us reduce that risk of injury. So we'll kind of come back around to that through the discussion tonight. So, all right, let's dive in. So what is warming up? Well, it's basically you're preparing your body and your mind for an activity, right? And so the purpose of our warm-up might be to increase blood flow to our muscles, increase our range of motion, our flexibility, increase power, improve focus. So there's a lot of different aspects of why we warm up before doing an activity. And another really important aspect that I want to talk about tonight is also using that time to check in with how you're feeling in that particular moment, in that particular day. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit, because I think that's a really important piece of the warm-up. And then so we take all of this information and take our warm-up time, and what this does, it allows us to kind of regulate and adjust our climbing session based on kind of how we're feeling physically and mentally for that day. So the first piece is the physical aspect, and that's the one that a lot of times is most commonly thought about and most commonly researched about, actually, is kind of the physiological aspect of warming up. And so you'll hear a lot of stretching, and so there's different types of stretching that we can do. So one is a static stretch, and what that means is that you're holding a position for a longer period of time. So like in high school, we would sit on the ground and reach our toes and hold that stretch. You may have seen kind of the common forearm stretch where you're holding this position, right? And so I'm just holding this position for 30 seconds or so. Maybe I'll do it this way. So that's an example of what a static stretch is. And then another type is either an active or dynamic stretch. And what that means, you're just moving while you stretch. So for example, think of yoga and kind of going through the flows of different positions. And so you're moving right through those ranges and then doing kind of the stretch through that. Another, you see people kind of walk back and forth in the gym and they're doing butt kicks or kicking their legs out. That's the same concept. You're going through a range of motion and you're moving as you stretch. So the trend in the past 10 years is moving towards that dynamic piece. There's still room for some static stretching, but we're starting to see athletes and people kind of in research favoring more of this dynamic type stretching of doing this through movement versus holding a position. And again, there's still research to be done. There isn't even a solid consensus about the influence of a warm-up on sport performance. And again, I'm talking about the physical aspect of it. So do your muscles perform better if you warm up? That's what a lot of the studies are looking at. So kind of some of my thoughts on of what you can go through when you're warming up. Okay, so what activity are you warming up for? What do you need to be able to do? And so climbing really is unique because you're going through so many different positions, right? So you have to think about what parts of your body need to move. And so for me, I'll just kind of go through my general warm up that I do. So I have stiff ankles, they're terrible. So I'll just kind of raise up on my toes and back and down. So I move my ankles that way. Hips, I'll go almost kind of like if I had a hula hoop, so I'll take my hips through that motion. Spine, you do a lot of spinal movement in climbing. So I'll just slowly reach down towards my toes, and then I'll slowly raise up, and then I'll bring my arms up and doing a little stretch. So you can see me just kind of a little stretch this way, and then I'll move my arms down, stretching back this way, doing some arm circles. So now I've moved up to my shoulders. Then my wrist, do a lot of wrist motion. So I'll do circles this way, I'll go back. There's not a certain amount of time that you have to do this for, or like 10 reps this way, 10 reps that way. I'm just sort of taking a few minutes to go through all of these movements. And then I'll do my fingers too. So think about the movement of your hands. Yeah. So our hands straighten and they bend. And then they also open this way, come back together. And then we have our thumbs that move. And so I just do a really quick, I kind of combine all those movements and I just kind of flick my fingers out this way. So I'm getting all of those movements in my thumb and fingers. And I just, if you ever see me at the gym, I'm just like kind of doing this all the time. It's sort of habit now. So if you ever see somebody just standing there flicking their fingers, that might be me.
A mask on, yeah. Oh,
yeah. It's one way to know it's me. And so and then my neck too is another one that I do, especially with belaying. I think, Tiffany, we've talked about this, just getting that stiff neck. So a lot of times I'll just do kind of some circles this way, again, to get that area of my body moving. So going through all of those pieces, thinking of what you need to be able to move for climbing, and then going through those movements. If you're hangboarding, so some of the experts have recommended just hanging from a pull-up bar, and that's your warm-up before hangboarding. And so you think with hangboarding, right, you're just holding that position, and it's the same with the pull-up bar. You're just warming up by holding in a similar position. And so you can see with that, I'm not going through any motions with it because I'm preparing for hangboarding activity. So that's another kind of way to think about the physical part of the warm-up. Okay, so another aspect that I like to think about is assessing your environment. So if you're going outside, right, and maybe you have to do a hike into your climb, so your heart rate's up, you're moving, right, you're getting plenty of warm-up. And doing that hike. And then for me, I don't know if other people have this too, my hands swell up all the time in Tucson with hiking. So I'm always kind of just doing these pumps. So here's another helpful tip: above the level of your heart, and then raising your hands and pumping, that will help push out some of that swelling. So I'm kind of already doing that hiking. So by the time I get to my climb, like I'm pretty warmed up. Now, if I'm going to sit down and just hang out for half an hour, I might do a little bit of a warm up again before I go into the climb because I've sat around for 30 minutes. But yeah, if you're going straight into that climb, that can be your warm up. The other end of things, if it's a really cold day, maybe you walked 10 feet into the gym, your fingers are feeling kind of stiff, you're still cold, your heart rate's not up. So doing some activity to again prepare your body for the activity. So you could be walking on the treadmill or doing some of those examples that I gave earlier about the dynamic stretching. Okay, So make sure I didn't leave anything out there. All right, so it's like I want to tell everything. Okay, so the other aspect of warming up that I think is just as important, and especially if you've dealt with an injury or back to returning to climbing after an injury, is using that time to check in with your body and your mindset as well. So we'll start with checking in with your body. How are you feeling? Like, did you sleep good last night? Are you hungry? Are you thirsty?
Are you adulting or are you not adulting?
Yeah. How'd your day go? How's everyone's day right now? How's life this year? So all of those things can really, have an impact on kind of your performance, right? Not just the physical component. And maybe you're feeling really strong that day. You're strong, you've got a lot of energy, you're motivated. When we're looking at injuries, so I'll use myself for an example. I've dealt with like the tennis elbow, so that on the outside of the elbow, I know climbers deal with this a lot. So when I'm warming up, I always just kind of touch over this part that was tender just to see how it feels. So I'm like, okay, it feels great. No tenderness at all today. Or, okay, it's a little bit sore. So I'm just going to take note of that. And that's going to help me adjust my session if I need to. So taking note of those things before you start climbing. And then another part too is if there's like a route you're working on, you can start that visualization process, or if there's a technique that you're working on for that day, if you're trying to get your hips close to the wall or something like that, already thinking about those movements and how you're going to go about doing those movements for your climbing session. And so that's another aspect of the warming up piece. Okay, so warming up after an injury. So first, make sure that you're allowed to, things are healed, you've been released by a medical professional. So let's say you've been released and you are ready to return back to climbing. So again, this is a great time to assess your pain level. What types of pains are you feeling? Is it just a little achy, or is it sore? Is there tenderness in any parts of the hand or upper body? Is there, again, what types of pains? Is there any sharp pains? Things like that. So taking note of how you're currently feeling before you start. And this really allows you to track how your body is responding during your climbing time. So for example, with the elbow, let's say like felt fine, no soreness. I start climbing and maybe there's a little bit of soreness and it goes away after a few routes. Okay, awesome. I'm not going to really worry about that. Let's say, okay, there's a move that I keep working on and it's really starting to aggravate my elbow. I'm probably going to then adjust my session, working on maybe different moves that aren't aggravating that, or doing climbs that are maybe a little bit easier, or working on a different technique. Or if it's no matter what I do or how I adjust my session, that pain just keeps going up, 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 then I'm probably going to make the call like, all right, I probably need to end here today before I start to overdo it. And so you can't adjust that unless you know how you felt in the beginning. So the other piece too, how long has it been since you've climbed? Were you out for a couple of weeks after your injury, or has it been months? Are you nervous about it? Are you kind of anxious about re-injury? Are you just like 100% ready to go and ready to get back to the level that you were at, before you had to take this break? So kind of checking in with what your mindset is, when you're doing your warm-up. And so hopefully this is kind of making sense of the physical and mental components, right? That that we use during our warming up to really make the most of our climbing experience. And then to kind of, flip back to the beginning where I mentioned about reducing the risk of injury or re-injury, so you can see how, that awareness of how your body is feeling and adjusting your climbing session is going to help reduce that risk, right? Because now you're paying attention to it. And you're learning how to modify or adapt so that when your body is telling you something, you're listening to it. So hopefully that all makes sense and was helpful.
Well, I just want to let you guys know that.
Back to you.
Oh, sorry.
What happened?
You must have frozen on my screen and I thought you were done. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm done. Yeah, it's back to you.
So I just want to let everybody know that we are trying to keep these really short and accessible and then have a Q&A afterwards. But it's also really important to know that Dorothy can be reached per email via email address, which I've attached to when I share these information, these videos, as well as you can find her on Instagram and Facebook. So please reach out if you have something specific. To the best of my knowledge, Dorothy, you are accepting like new virtual patients and appointments and things like that, correct?
Yes.
All right. Well, if you guys have questions, now is the time. And again, I figured that we would utilize the chat function because this is being recorded and my screen goes to the speaker. But if you want to be on screen, that's fine too. No problems there. I can't find the raise hand function, but if that exists on your screen, you could go ahead and utilize that as well. And just so you guys know, one of the things that Dorothy and I discussed before we started these installments was that although this is general medical advice, Dorothy's actually really comfortable taking information and, for somebody that she's not seen before and speaking to them about that even here. So of course she's not gonna be able to diagnose or whatever. You can interrupt me if I say something stupid, Dorothy, but don't be afraid if you have something specific.
Yeah, and plus in Tucson, I know, some of the surgeons and things here too. So if you need help of like, who should I go see? I'm happy to give that information as well.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Is anybody surprised by the lack of evidence that warming up actually prevents injury? Because I was.
It's just something. I mean, how many years have we been studying or talking about warming up?
All the years?
All the years? Yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, I'm really excited I really hope a lot more will happen in the world of climbing, specifically with injuries and rehab and kind of all this research. So fingers crossed.
I mean, who knows what the Olympics will look like, but.
Yeah, that's true. Is that this year? When is that happening?
I think that Tokyo has said they're going to make it happen in 2021 and have to lose like one of the coolest Olympic logos ever.
Oh, really?
Because it was the big curve of the 2 and the curve of the 0 and all that.
Yeah, it's just the big old one.
Does anybody want to share their warming up and how that works or hasn't worked or has changed over the years? Oh my gosh, we actually have a question. This actually happened super recently, I think. So the question is, Dorothy, how long would you suggest taking time off of climbing if I have 7 stitches in my hand? The cut is just below the fat layer and has been healing nicely this past week. Thanks.
Okay. And the sutures are still in place, I'm assuming?
Let me see. I'm going to put this. Yes.
Okay. So I would wait until, when those stitches are taken out, and then probably at least 48 hours after those sutures are removed, because you also have the little holes of the suture that needs to heal. And the reason I say that with climbing, you know, you don't want to introduce infection into that wound or that's healing. And so once those stitches have come out and the little stitch holes have healed, then it's okay to start climbing.
And then he did say the cut was on the bottom of his palm, just because I asked where it was. And actually, I'm going to be weird, Tom. I don't know if you can see this, but I actually have a pretty gnarly scar right here. Yeah. Next time I see you in the gym, I'll share my story, which did not involve stitches. Or you can tell me, go away, I don't want to hear your story. Okay, so another question. What about the temporary use of anti-inflammatory medicines like ibuprofen for hand and wrist soreness from climbing injuries? Is this okay?
So as far as medical advice on medication, that's more out of my scope of practice. I will say with anti-inflammatories, right, the purpose is to usually reduce swelling, reduce pain. So I think it's important to know what's causing the pain, so that you're not reducing that inflammation and then going back and doing an activity or something that then will just inflame it again. Yeah. So it can be helpful in managing things, but I think it's still important to address the reason why it's inflamed in the first place. But you know, plenty of people have certainly used whatever anti-inflammatory you typically use, or your doctor prescribes you or whatnot, has been used for pain and swelling. So
I think it's important to reiterate so Dorothy's background as an occupational therapist and the way she explained it to me, and I actually know a handful of occupational therapists, but nobody ever explained it to me this well. So Dorothy essentially is with very specifically referring to the upper extremity, right? The hand and upper extremity. Your expertise is getting people back to their daily occupations. So sometimes that is a climber, right, who has all these specific weird hand movements and very specific stresses and power that they require of their upper body. But maybe it's somebody who suffered a stroke and is trying to learn to feed themselves or dress themselves. So getting back to a daily occupation is her background with her certified hand specialist and where she came from there. So
I'm not trying to find you a new job or anything. We have terrible names for occupational and hand therapists. Like neither one describes really what we do, but that's for another day.
This is kind of nice. It seems like we'll be able to keep it under an hour. Does anybody else have questions or thoughts? I don't see anybody raising their hands, so I'm gonna go off of that. Feel free to type in. If you don't want everybody to see your question in the chat, you can actually use the drop-down menu to message me directly, and I can ask the question, and then it would be anonymous, which I just realized I didn't with Tom, so I'm sorry. I said your name like 5 times. Give it a minute or two in case anybody thinks of something they want to bring up. But did you have any, Dorothy, any final thoughts on what you see people doing in the gyms in our community?
I had one go through my head and then it left.
Friday after a full work week. So
I'll let you know.
Everything is forgiven in my book.
Oh, it's gonna drive me nuts now.
We can just tack it on to the next one somehow.
Yeah, there we go.
All right. So yes, I will share that information. I will ask Dorothy what her preferred way of contacting is, and that will be with the Instagram video as well as with the Rocks and Ropes YouTube channel. But I'm going to do this one thing. Sorry. I think I think that's all we've got right now. Sorry, I wanted to type a message to somebody.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Great
Um,
questions.
well, you guys, I think that was great. I think it was accessible. It was short. We didn't overwhelm anybody. And again, this really holistic approach to not only just what you're doing physically, but how you approach your activity, whatever activity that is. That's one of the reasons that, again, we were really excited that Dorothy wanted to spend a bunch of time Zoom meeting with me and emails so that we could bring you guys this. So I already told you where the recordings would be. If you're not on Instagram, that's totally fine. Please check out our YouTube channel. Hopefully this will eventually be up on our blog, on our website as well. Thank you for joining us. And very specifically, thank you so much, Dorothy, for volunteering your time to be with us and share your expertise and surprise us that warming up isn't necessarily proven to prevent an injury.
Reduce the risk.
Mitigate risk. That's
exactly. I appreciate you having me on here, and thanks for all the behind the scenes work with setting up the meeting.
Lots of thanks coming in through the chat, Dorothy, so just know that. And
everyone. Appreciate you
awesome.
being here. Yeah.
All right. And wait, we got to say bye to the dog too.
So I'm going to know who watched this when I see this in the gym. This is our new signal.
Actually, yeah, if you guys look in the first video, you can see both of us doing this too.
That's awesome. I love it.
All right. Well, that's all I got, you guys. Let's sign off and all have a wonderful weekend. And if you do go climbing, whether that's indoors or outdoors, hopefully you can keep this info in mind.
Yep, we'll be there.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great weekend. Bye.
Dorothy, somebody asked for your information. She said she thinks she needs a consultation.
Oh.
So do you want me to email it to you? I told her to message it to me privately because I'm the host, but can I just read it to you?
Yeah.
And I'll share with her as well. Your Dorothy at Reach Hand Care, but it's G.J. Leonard.
G.J. Leonard.
At hotmail.com. I guess I can stop recording now.
Oh, yeah.
And that.